Good afternoon or good morning, everyone, depending on where you're located. And welcome to today's webinar, Navigating the Year-End Process with Confidence. We appreciate you taking the time. We know it's busy, especially with ACA filing season happening right now. My name is Robin Carlini. I'm Partner Marketing Manager here at SingStream Solutions and also your webinar moderator today. Throughout today's session, we'll walk you through everything you need to know to finalize and get you through this deadline. And a little disclaimer about SingStream. We do not provide legal guidance or advice. You will still need to ask certain questions to your legal counsel. However, we will give you ACA guidance with software knowledge. And a little bit of housekeeping. If you have a question, please type it into your Zoom webinar box. We will answer questions towards the end of the webinar. And as you noticed, I think the webinar is being recorded. We will be emailing this recording out to all registrants by Monday afternoon. And your feedback's important to us. So as you exit the webinar, you will have a survey pop up. If you don't mind just answering those questions, that does help us plan these webinars out. And today's webinar is led by Stacey Davidson, National Sales Director at SingStream. She has over a decade of experience here and has been instrumental in helping companies and partners navigate the complexities of ACA compliance, particularly within the broker channel. And a little bit about our background. SingStream Solutions was one of the first technology companies that provided companies with Affordable Care Act software. We've been in business since 2013 with the inception of the law. And 95% of our staff has been here since the beginning as well. We just love the Affordable Care Act here at SingStream. And we have our little scorecard here at the bottom, you can see. And the one I like to really talk about is the 97% customer retention rate. We have kept all our customers, or most of them, since the beginning and as we move through, which I hope is a testament to what we can provide them. And exciting news, Celerix has acquired SingStream Solutions. So now we're a Celerix company. And this acquisition creates one of the largest providers of ACA solutions in the US market. Together, we're expanding our ability to deliver ACA compliance and benefit administration services. And there's a QR code here that tells you a little bit more about our parent company. And our agenda will be covering February task to complete, review final steps of reporting, the form review of 1095 and 1094C forms. And Stacey's gonna walk you through IRS e-filing results and some updates and deadlines. We're gonna kick the webinar off with the poll. So let me go ahead and launch the poll. Sorry, that is not the first. Let me go to the first. Our first poll question. What is your current status in the 2024 ACA reporting process? Is it, I have not started yet? I have completed everything and already e-filed forms to the IRS. I have already printed the 1095s. I am in the process still of reporting, or the last one, I am unsure what to do still, which is not a very good place to be. We'll give you a minute to answer. Okay, Stacey, it looks like 11%. I have not started yet. That's a bit scary. 21%, I've completed everything and already e-filed. Kudos to everyone who answered that one. I have already printed my forms, 24%. 38% are in the process and 4% are unsure.
Great.
We will kick it off to Stacey Davidson.
Hi, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here with you today. If it's your first time joining one of our SingStream webinars, Welcome. We do these on a monthly basis. We cover a variety of ACA topics and processes, educational in nature. We take pride in trying to simplify all of the complexities of the ACA for our clients, partners, and all who want to join our webinars just to learn more. Back to the poll, it's very, normal to be maybe in between, e-filing and printing and mailing, or even, the print and mail deadline, especially internally for SyncStream, hasn't even happened yet. So while we are all very eager to get this behind us, we want to make sure through this webinar today that we just touch on some topics and some things to look for. You don't want to rush it too much that there could be an error that just causes you more issues with the IRS later. So take a deep breath, you'll get there, and let's just go over some key things that we want to touch base with you regarding your e-filing and some other things as you proceed through this process. We're always about, next slide. Before we get there, we're always about talking about how to manage ACA throughout the year. We believe in managing this year-round to minimize compliance risks and really reduce administrative burden. And so while, we actively work with our clients to manage this year-round, in the event that you're doing this on your own, perhaps, you just want to keep, these tasks in mind for February specifically, and then we'll talk about, what we recommend that you do year-round. So particularly where you are standing here basically in February, you want to review and audit and complete maybe your penalty assessments for each form that is going to go to the employees and to the IRS. You want to furnish your 1095-C forms to your full-time employees, full-time equivalents, or self-funded groups. You'll also have to furnish a 1095 form or a 1095B or C form. And then, the IRS changed regulations last year, but if you're still in the, have 10 forms or less, you have the ability to mail those in. That has a February 28th deadline. But as we know with those regulation changes last year, most employers have to e-file their 1095 and 1094 forms to the IRS. And that deadline is March 31st. While it's not a February checklist item. So let's go to the next slide, Robin. And, as I alluded to, we believe in, while you will finish your filing for 2024 and want to move on and be done with it till maybe this time next year, we do believe in monitoring and maintaining and managing this year round. So we're going to discuss a few strategies to try to keep you ahead for 2025 reporting. You always want to monitor your employees' full-time status and how many hours they're working. For variable hour employees, seasonal employees, you want to have a consistent way to track their hours, keeping in mind all the variety of regulations around that. In the event of an audit or an employee going to the marketplace and you get a 226J letter. So if you have a population of employees that are variable hour, you're not hiring them as, designated full-time, you want to have a consistent way to measure them for benefit eligibility. It'll benefit you in the long run should you run into anything with the IRS. You want to offer affordable minimum essential coverage and minimum value coverage to newly hired full-time employees or those who track to be benefit eligible and their dependents within the first 3 calendar months, start of the next, first of the next calendar. So 3 months to the first of the following month. That's what is the requirement by the IRS. Now you may have a 60-day waiting period, 30-day internally. The IRS grants you 90 days and to the first of the next calendar month. So what data could you be looking at to try help, you manage this ACA compliance year round? Well, certainly payroll data, keeping up with addresses and socials so that you have those for reporting needs, and offers of coverage. we call it offers of coverage. It's basically when you offer, that medical plan upon an employee's, eligibility. The IRS wants you to, do that in a timely manner, make sure it's affordable. So all of these things obviously are what goes into the reporting on the 1095-C forms. It's imperative that you just kind of keep track of that. Nobody wants to find out at the end of the year that they've been non-compliant. The A penalty is for not offering 95% of your full-time employees the opportunity to enroll in MEC coverage. So if there's a strategy to only offer MEC within your organization, you want to make sure that you're hitting that 95%. Of course, any employer needs to be monitoring that to make sure that they're offering MEC, minimum essential coverage, to 95% of their full-time employees. And then not offering affordable coverage or timely coverage could result in a B penalty if an employee goes to the marketplace. And that is what the result of that would be, a 226J letter, which goes into making sure you're being consistent with tracking towards benefit eligibility and keeping track of affordability and such. Next slide. So as we prepare to e-file, hopefully soon for many of you, you just want to make sure that you've kind of reviewed these steps. Have you taken into consideration, all of this information that we've talked about to ensure compliance, or that you're doing the codes correctly, or that if there's a software that's doing the codes for you, that those are accurate. You want to make sure that you've offered that MEC coverage to 95%. It's going to be very imperative that you recognize that on the 1094 form, that you know who you need to report on, calculated full-time employees or calculated or designated full-time employees, that your population of your 1095-C forms have the correct indicator codes, proper calculations for affordability and the safe harbor. You want to hopefully be able to review those 1095-C forms with confidence so that you can identify if you're susceptible to any penalty risks. And then the 1094-C form, which is the transmittal form about your company, you want to look over that for accuracy. And we're going to cover some key points in both of those forms in a bit.
Okay, our second poll question, I will go ahead and launch it. What key information do you need to confirm that you have successfully filed to the IRS? Is it an IRS acknowledgement receipt or receipt ID? Is it a submission report? Is it's accepted as soon as I click submit? Or is it D, a U.S. Postal Service certified receipt? Give everyone a minute. Okay, Stacy, 81% an IRS receipt ID, 17% a submission report, and 2% it's accepted as soon as I click submit, and nobody for the Postal Service.
Great. So of course the correct answer is a receipt ID. As I like to say, keep the eye on the prize. That's what you want to get from the IRS to get your confirmation that you've completed that. For those who felt like it was accepted as soon as I click submit, keep in mind we are waiting, or any vendor basically who is filing to the IRS through the AIR system is waiting for the IRS answer back. And as we'll review today in a few slides, anything can happen where the IRS will just reject a filing. So don't just assume that you've hit submit and it's gone. You want to always verify that you've gotten a receipt ID and a status. And we'll talk about some of those statuses as well. So we've kind of been a little bit redundant, but it's important to kind of cover some of the steps just to make sure that we're ensuring that you guys are staying compliant. You want to review your 1094 and 1095-C forms. The worst thing to do is go through this whole process and send something to the IRS that's not an accurate depiction of your offer to your employees, right? Just get you, just more headaches possibly in the future. You want to distribute those forms to the employees. Now we know that there's been some recent legislation changes that, have changed that up a bit. And we'll talk about that in a second as well. You want to make sure that you're filing to the IRS. If you have employees that reside in New Jersey, DC, Rhode Island, California, or Massachusetts, those states require that you are providing the 1095-C form or their version of the 1095-C form to those states about your employees that reside in those states, regardless of where the company resides. So keep in mind, we've seen even California provide penalty letters about that. So you want to stay on top of that. There's maybe sometimes misconceptions around, oh, well, I'm in Texas, my company is in Texas, and I have employees all over throughout the United States. Yes, you have an obligation if you have employees that reside in those states to file on behalf of those employees specifically to those states. And then as we'll review, when you send the e-file to the IRS, there could be a status of accepted with errors. So you want to look over those forms. And if you have to make any, corrections, then make those corrections and resubmit. And then, of course, eye on the prize, confirm that you have a receipt ID. Let's look at some forms, further forms. If you're a current client of ours using our solution, we have the technology to help you address if there are any potential IRS risks with the indicator codes on your forms. A lot of times this indicates maybe a data gap. It could be a date that was wrong. But before we send those off to the employees or to the IRS, we are reviewing each form and auditing each form and the code combination, that language that goes to the IRS for checks and balances to make sure that before anything gets filed or sent to fulfillment, that we're going to review that. So it's imperative if you're not using a software that does some auditing, you want to make sure that you're doing that yourself. The 1095-C form obviously has important information, the employee name, the social. Important about that is it really should be what they presented to you on their social security card upon hire, because that's likely what's going to be in the database with the IRS. Of course, the address, because we're going to be mailing these forms out, and the last 4 digits of the social would be masked through a vendor, but goes as a full social to the IRS.
Last poll. I want to thank everyone for your participation. Okay, what are the correct codes that can be used in line 14? Is it A, 1A to 1U, B, 2A to 2I, C, 1A to 1Z, or D? I have no idea. I'm going to launch it again. It didn't look like anyone
No,
was
it didn't
answering.
launch. I don't think it launched.
Relaunch poll.
There
Okay,
you
there you go. Now you can answer.
go.
Okay, we have answers across the board here. 54% 1A to 1U, 16% 2A to 2I, 13% have answered 1A to 1Z, and 15% I have no idea.
Well, the answer is number one, 1A to, or A, letter A, I should say, 1A to 1U. I would really like to meet whoever came up with these indicator codes. This language that tells about, language for lines 14 and 16 and what it means together and so forth and so on can be quite confusing. So rest assured, if you're using our software, or another, reliable software that they take the source data. They should be able to populate those codes for you with confidence. Of course, you still want to review. So the line 14 is about the offer of coverage, and you can use a series of codes between 1A and 1U. Line 16 is about the safe harbor, and you can use, between 2A and 2I. And together, separate, they all tell a little bit of a different story as they come together, and that's how the IRS wants to know about your offer of coverage. Again, don't know who came up with all of this stuff, but it would be really interesting to see, their thought process behind it. So, of course, knowing that, you have 14 and 16 populated, if it's all 12 months, you can use that first box if it's consistent throughout, the whole year. But, with terms and, somebody's not an employee or, different scenarios throughout the year can cause that code combination to change on a monthly basis. Okay, so that's what it looks like, blank. And then, of course, line 15, needing the required employee contribution for the lowest cost monthly contribution for employee-only coverage. It's a mouthful. And then if you are self-funded, you would be required to have Part 3 populated. Part 3 is about covered individuals and the month that they were covered. So it'd be your dependents, the covered employee and the dependents. For covered dependents, you're required to provide either the social or the date of birth. That's an option. Or, of course, you can provide both. Next slide. So the 1094-C is what we'll address next. That's the transmittal form about the EIN, the employer. So you'll have name or EIN number, total number of 1095-C forms that will be transmitted with this 1094 form. Are you an aggregate group? Certifications of eligibility. This very important minimum essential coverage offer indicator, we'll show you that. The full-time employee count per month and a total employee count per month, an aggregated group indicator, and then also other companies that could be in your aggregated group due to common ownership. So we have up here the reporting employer information with the EIN number. You have an employer contact at the employer for the IRS to contact, and there should be a contact telephone number. If it's a designated government entity, it would be, lines 9 through 15, but this is really about the employer. Part 2, it's about, how many forms, 1095 forms will be going with the 1094. Is this ALE member part of an aggregated group? And then in certain circumstances, you would have certifications of eligibility, really about, qualifying offer of method, 98% offer method on line 22. So this is part 3. This is where it's indicating that you're offered 95% of your full-time employees the opportunity to enroll in MEC. If you do not check this box, yes, you can really expect to get notified from the IRS with perhaps a penalty notice, clarification and such. Years of experience. If you're using a payroll provider, an outside, vendor, you really want to make sure that they are checking that box for you. You'd be surprised how many penalty letters we've seen where it was just forgotten to check. So, and can't assume anything. So you really want to make sure that that is checked if that is the case, that you have offered your 95% of your full-time employees MEC coverage. And then, of course, you had, that was just where you would put the total employee count and the full-time employee count by month. And then lastly, Excuse these company names. If you've ever seen one of our demos, you know we use Horror Inc. Gets a lot of laughs, but this is how you indicate that you have other companies in your aggregated group, and you refer to them and their EIN number. All right, let's talk about IRS responses. So remember, when you hit submit, you got to come back and check to get a receipt ID, and you might get a response. Accepted. Oh, is this a poll? Sorry. Go ahead.
It's actually not, so you can go through the answer.
Okay, I thought that was a poll. Sorry. Okay. Oh, you're right. Sorry. It just said poll. It caught me by surprise. Go back, Robin.
Okay. These are just the possible answers.
Yeah, so we have accepted, which I always say is golden, right? If you get accepted and a receipt ID, you're done, celebrate. If you get accepted with errors, very, very, very common. It could, you will, most of the time, if you, in a software like ours, you will get to see what that error is about. The IRS will communicate which form it has an issue with and what the issue is. And it could be, a lot of times, a social and name mismatch. And then you want to confirm that the social that you reported, perhaps the name, is what was actually submitted to the IRS. There was no typos or anything. And sometimes there's really just nothing you can do about an accepted with errors and social and name mismatch. But you want to at least do some confirmation on your end that what you provided, what you filed, is what you were provided. Then, unfortunately, rejected and failed validations do happen, and that is, and we'll go over that in a second at a slide, but the IRS just doesn't like something with your filing, and we'll talk about that next. So we've reviewed accepted with errors, processing. Sometimes you'll get a receipt ID and it'll say processing. It just hasn't come back with one of these statuses. Partially accepted could be a possible status back, and that just means that you're going to have to, look into what the issue could be and work on correcting any errors and resubmitting. Rejected would be a failed validation. A lot of times that's the IRS doesn't like something in the file. It could be as simple as an ampersand, a number sign on one of your forms in somebody's address. That's how particular it can be. It could be something around an EIN and a name not matching on the form. So, of course, just deep breaths. All you need to do is take action on these, responses that you get from the IRS and make corrections and just get through it. Just knowing that the IRS, as long as you have a receipt ID, you have that confirmation and they allow 60 days to make corrections, but you want to get that receipt ID first. Oh, sorry, I'm a little ahead of myself. But reasons for rejections can be a submission was not formatted correctly, the AIR system cannot read it, business rule failures, incorrect submission ID, the 1094C transmittal error due to incorrect employer name, FEIN, or there's an unacceptable character somewhere in one of those forms. All right. So we've covered this in a couple of our last webinars, but really there was no changes in forms for 2024. 2023 hit us with the regulation change around the amount of forms that needed to be e-filed. The FPL safe harbor for 2024 was that a plan could not exceed $101.94 for employee-only coverage each month to pass the safe harbor. Not always achievable. So then you look at, the rate of pay or W-2, and then the IRS comes up with a percentage each year. In 2024, the percentage was 8.39%. We talked about the threshold for electronic filing. And then what's gotten a lot of buzz lately is the Paperwork Reduction Act. And we'll talk about that in the next slide. The affordability for 2025 is 9.02%. So as you prepare for 2025 filing, keep that in mind. So the key provisions of the Paperwork Reduction Act, which happened right around the end of the year, it was going to simplify some processes for the employers, change that employers were no longer required to mail the 1095-C forms. It talked about, in theory, that employees would be able to request a 1095-C form should they want one for their records. And it also said that while this was a change in providing a paper form, it was still a requirement for employees to e-file the forms to the IRS. The legislation did not, it was pretty light and pretty vague. It did not provide any information about how this would change the state requirements. So while we named those 5 states that have the e-file requirements, we don't know if those states would still require printing and mailing of the forms. The changes were effective for this filing year. Very vague, very light on processes and compliance around how do you notify your employees of this change. So we found, and it kind of a little bit industry-wide, that a lot of people just proceeded with business as usual, and we anticipate getting more updates with the compliance and legislation around this as we move forward into 2025. Oh, some other key provisions that kind of were passed through this legislation. Employers can furnish the 1095-B and C electronically with employee consent. So there is an option, that you can still provide it electronically if printing and mailing wanted to be ceased at the employer level. Employers can use an individual's date of birth instead of a social security number for 1095-B and C reporting. This applies if a social cannot be collected. And then the response time for initial ESRP letters, it used to be 30 days, that if you got a penalty, we call them penalty letters, but it could be a notice. I mean, they don't all have a penalty amount initially. It used to be that you would have 30 days to reply. They're giving the employers a little bit more time now. It's now 90 days, which is good. And then they have been all over the place with statute of limitations, but now they're saying there's a 6-year statute of limitations that was established for the IRS to seek any kind of, penalty or filing for a past year. And that was initially, they had made, or I say about in 2020, they said that there was no statute of limitations. So it's nice to see that they can't go back further than 6 years now. So let's review the deadlines. The IRS would like, if you're printing and mailing and the forms, the deadline is to have them postmarked by March 3rd. That's the IRS deadline. That's for them to, receive their 1095-C form either by mail or electronic delivery. And March 31st is the deadline for the IRS to receive the 1094 and 1095. So you want to have a receipt ID before March 31st. We are still accepting clients if you need help. Some people just need an e-file vendor. So we can help with that. Just reach out. Let's talk about the states. Massachusetts had a January 31st deadline for the distribution of the forms. They have an e-file deadline of March 31st. So that's, they're requiring, they really all have a March 31st deadline. California had a January 31st print and mail deadline with a March 31st e-file deadline. And so does, while DC, New Jersey, and Rhode Island follow the IRS deadline for print and mail, they have a March 31st deadline as well for the e-filing.
Okay, and I can give Stacy a little break if you want
Thank you.
before we get to the questions. A little key features about SingStream Solutions. As I mentioned earlier, our staff is tenured. Over 95% of us have been here since the inception of the law. So you will get an ACA compliance expert when you come to SingStream Solutions. But I wanted to point out we do have monthly compliance risk reports. If you're with full service, as most of our clients are, you do have a designated account manager that handholds you through the entire filing process with monthly or bi-monthly meetings. As Stacy mentioned, state filing is also included, and 97% of our customers have stayed with us through the years. And for next month's webinar, it's going to be a very good one. Avoiding penalties and understanding ACA penalty letters and types of letters. This will be conducted by our Director of ACA Services, Ashley Pope, and co-presented by our Chief Legal Counsel, Stacy Barrow, who deals with penalty letters every day of his life. So he will be able to really guide everyone with the letters. So there's a QR code there to join, and it is offered with a SHRM credit for live attendees. You will receive a SHRM credit. And my information for contact information is there. I'll be sending, as I said, everyone a recording. And if you email me and request slides, I can provide you with slides as well. And now we will go through questions. We will still be here a couple more minutes to answer some questions. If for some reason we can't answer the question, we will email you with the final good answer today. So don't be afraid, your questions will get answered. Okay, Stacy.
Sure. I'm getting some requests for code combinations, and while we can't advise, what we can do is send you an indicator code list so that you can determine the best scenario and code combination for your situation. Because again, like, somebody's asking for a safe harbor code for line 16. Well, keep in mind, you have to also know, about the offer of coverage code for line 14. So for anybody who's asking for a code combination, we'll send you a list so that you can best determine which code to use. We have a question, are we still subject to penalties with name errors? No. I mean, while it's called an error, it's just, again, a way to just say that what the IRS has in their database for a name and social doesn't match with what you're reporting. So we just recommend that you confirm there wasn't a typo along the way in the social or a name. And again, you may never find out, the right combination. It could be a middle initial, it could be a hyphen. You never know. So there is no penalties for not having having an error around name and social mismatch. Part 3, are we required to use socials for covered dependents, or we can submit date of birth? That's an option. You can do either or for covered dependents. You don't need to do both. Says in 2024, we were not a qualified ALE. We've been filing the ACA for previous years. What reports should we submit to the IRS so that it won't show that we forgot to file? So keep in mind, if you were an ALE in 2023, then you're doing the filing for 2024. So your status as an ALE depends on the previous year. And there are some employers who fluctuate, under an ALE status, over an ALE status. If you just don't need to file and you have previously, then no, there's no, report or anything that you have to submit. In the event that the IRS sends you a 5699 letter saying, hey, we noticed that you didn't have a filing this year, you can have a response to say that you weren't an applicable large employer and likely have to, provide some documentation around that. But that is a very common for people to fluctuate in the status that way. Let me see what else. You will not receive accepted with name and social security. You will receive an accepted, but it'll be called accepted with errors. And that's very common for people to stop at that, having an accepted with errors due to a name and social mismatch.
And for the SHRM credit question, this webinar did not have a SHRM credit, but next month's webinar does have a SHRM credit.
Coming in. Hold on. I'm just trying to keep up with what was, I should have, let's see. Abdul will send you a code combination for you to determine what to use for 14 and 16, because we can't give you the codes not knowing about the offer of coverage and what type of plan it was and the tiers of coverage. Those are all of the factors that go into the code combination for 14. So I'm trying to see, Robin, it's hard to keep up with these.
Can we just read them off? A lot of code combination requests. We do have your
Yes, I know.
requests.
Yep. Answered that. Answered that.
About
Are we
Islam.
required, okay, here we go. Are we required to include COBRA covered individuals in the filing in 1095C form distribution? If you are a self-funded, self-insured, if you're offering self-funded coverage, yes, you are required to report on COBRA.
You receive accepted with name and social security number errors. Wouldn't that be accepted with errors?
Yeah, I think I answered that one.
Okay.
What happens on 1095C Part 3 if Section B and C of employees do not match? Section B and C of employees do not match. I have to look at. Are you saying like the transmittal number and what you're reporting in the months? It likely should, well, it won't match because you're reporting on how many employees you had per month and you may have turnover and such. So your 1095C count would be different. They don't have to match if I'm understanding that question correctly. The 98% offer method is it's a certain way of, I mean, I don't really have a full explanation for that, but there's a documented way, compliance-wise, to account for the 98% offer method. I can get you some more information on that, but that would be something that we don't populate that because we don't have the documentation we don't get the documentation around confirming that, I should say. Sorry. So yeah, I'll get you some more information about the 98% offer of method. We don't populate that because it has to be a documented way to offer coverage, and we don't get that confirmation through our processes. So I'm a little, while I know what it is, I have to, be able to get you more information on that to accurately answer that.
And a customer is asking for our internal deadline,
Yeah, okay.
which I believe is the last week of February to meet the March 3rd.
Yes,
Mhm.
for the guarantee to be postmarked by March 3rd. Would a company be considered an ALE if combining internal and temporary staff? Yes. I mean, you know, that is all your employees would be going towards your ALE status, you know, as a full-time equivalent or full-time employee, you know, full-time equivalents. All right. All right. I think that's it.
Thank you, everyone, for bearing with us with the questions. We had well over
Yes.
20 questions.
No.
Handled it well, Stacy. And I'm still going to go through the questions later to make sure we answered it. And if we didn't, we'll email you an answer.
Yeah.
But again, thank you everyone for joining. We know this is a very stressful time as you try to meet these deadlines. We hope we helped you with some headaches. Don't forget to sign up for next month's webinar. We do these every month, as Stacy mentioned earlier. I'd say over 90% of our attendees attend every single month for the knowledge. But we know this today we have a lot of new ones, so we hope you enjoyed it. Again, don't forget to fill out that survey. That'll help us with future webinars. And good luck with meeting the deadlines. You're almost there, right, Stacy? We're getting
Yep.
there.
Reach out if we can do anything for you.
Okay. Thank you everyone for your time. We'll see you next month.
Bye-bye. Thank you.